So this is going to be something slightly different. It's going to be a campaign diary for one of my games after 21 sessions we've done now. And this is my Open Table Realms game, which we play on Discord. Anyone is welcome to join. So I'll put the link for the description in that if you're wanting to play some 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons in an established game. Drop in, drop out when you're available. This is the XP record from the end of the last session, which we played tonight. And what I want to do in this video is reflect on what's happened, I guess tell you a story of it to some degree, but also talk about design and talk about how it's gone, kind of some potential mistakes or potential flaws, things to improve, and just some of the experience of running a game. This is about my I'm trying to think that this there's no one in my longest running game. My longest running game is a 4.5, nearly 5-year-old 4.5-year-old very heavily modified 5th edition game. That's the longest running kind of proper regular game, which we now play weekly. Very heavily modded to particularly towards stuff to do with gold for XP sort of rules. And exploration and combat being tougher and healing being tougher, things like that. Something where I've had to make a game, make a fancy heartbreaker out of it to enjoy it. But it's that this is relatively speaking one of my other longer games in recent years, in terms of session number, not in terms of length of time. For 2nd edition, this has definitely been a teeth-cutting exercise in lots of ways. I played and I'm playing another game which we were in 1st edition, and we've transitioned to 2nd for basically for uniformity for my running the game experience, not because I think it's automatically better by any means. I think defences and strengths in both. That Greyhawk game has been going longer, but this has, I think, literally more sessions. Play once or twice a month. You can see here, I do this at the end of each session. I just do the XP and things you're getting XP for that you show here. There's combat related stuff, there's class related stuff, and there is journal entries. There's also gold for XP, and a couple of other normal ways of gaining XP basically. But I said that pretty much that. Gold for XP, combat, class, those are the main ways. I don't do any story XP in this. Gold for XP is an optional rule in 2nd edition, which isn't well supported in the material, apart from Night Below, very famously is a gold for XP campaign. But it's 2nd edition, the default is that it's not blue box, so you should do class rewards. That replaces the old good role-playing multiplier or divider in 1st edition. And you should do combat, and there's a brief mention of group rewards, which then in the DMG it mentions, the idea is that that's more to do with story XP. And story XP is, because it is numinous, it's something where it encourages players to find out what the DM wants to happen. It's bad, basically. It's a bad mechanic. Gold for XP is much better. I'll make a video one day, maybe soon. But here, this is what I do at the end of each session, and you can see that we've got the characters we've got the date, we have location left over, we've got the PCs who are involved. We had a small session today, a quiet session, with Sabritor and Kaitamar, and had a journal entry XP. We started with a bunch of they'd random encountered some manticores at the end of the last session, and which is terrifying for like a 3rd level party. And there's a bit of admin to do. In fact, I can see something that's wrong there on the rate of levels. But they'd had some admin to do, so I let them time travel because one player hadn't been there. So it's like, we'll just finish off this stuff. We did some accounting, and then we got on with it. They did the manticores. They got to a new locale, and they started exploring that and decided to leave it till they had some reinforcements with other players, other character types. What we've done, this is the 4th adventure, I guess, in 21 sessions. What you can see is we've got to having 3 third level characters, one of whom is very nearly got the XP for 4th, the Sound Assist Kaitamar. We have a 2nd level cleric who could be 3rd level based on XP, just hasn't been around to train the last couple of times, last couple of sessions. A fighter who's 2nd level, and a thief who's 2nd level. This thief is the 2nd character of the Sound Assist based on something we'll get to. There's also a dead character who wasn't raised. Kaitamar has died but was raised. Then Dogen, Trigon and Verona, one-time characters where players haven't been able to make it again. And then Gaston is the 2nd character of Culloden, made to deal with the fact that Culloden has a recuperation and training gap, which means that he couldn't leave with the party on time when they've gone south to the Bowshot Caves. And I count the sessions next to them. That's actually an internal accountability thing for me, to think what XP is available to players and how do they get it. And there are weird things where, in some ways, it like 4,000 in 10 sessions compared to 7,000 in 20. There's a gap between in terms of the ability to get XP there, and I think there's a couple of reasons why that's happened. Mostly because some sessions that you've got a gap of sessions there where often, if you come to some quite downtimey ones, or one where you fight four goblins and pick up a brooch worth 50 and check a couple of rooms, but it's not a particularly productive session comparatively. XP is going to be low, so I think there's some of that in there. But yeah, some of it has certainly seemed semi more normal. So gaining 2 levels in 10 sessions equivalent is maybe for some people slow, but not drastically slow. They're 2-hour sessions. They're online. I think they play slower than some other. We sometimes play slower than some other games I've been in. Sometimes it's pretty normal. What they started on, this is the fourth quest now, 4th adventure. They started as militiamen in Daggerford and in the Forgotten Realms, and they let's get up a big picture. They got a job list, rumours list as well, separate things. So jobs that the militia were interested in, rumours that they'd heard, and letting them choose from amongst them. And this is, I forget who made this exactly, but this is a really good, though frankly too large, high-res 20-mile hex map of the Forgotten Realms, which I use for a lot of stuff. There's Daggerford, and the first mission they went on, on a patrol. This is drawn from N5 under Ilafan, this particular thing. I collate resources for campaigns in set worlds, any world in fact, but particularly pre-gen worlds. I'll drag a bunch of resources together and dump them on the map together. N5 under Ilafan is based in the area. A bunch of characters I use, NPCs I use, are from that book. The first thing was to go down on a patrol down to the Way Inn to clear the road after winter and escort any overwintered caravans up. And so starting, we had 2 players in the first session, including long-time veteran Rolandi, our 3rd level wizard, who she's sort of more combaty because, if nothing else, has sleep as an early spell. They went down, they skirmished with some orcs, they tracked some gathering orcs into the Misty Forest, the edge of the Misty Forest around here, and then in the next session with heavy reinforcements, in fact, with Kaitamar the Sound Assist, with Sabrita the Witch, with Trigon the so Veron's a half-elf cleric, was also in that first session, Trigon the Human Thief, and Osling the halfling cleric of Rogalan, god of the of death. They travel back up, escorting the caravan that had been overwintered at the Way Inn, and eventually random encountered some bandits overnight, who then pursued them again through the day. I think that's the way around it went. So essentially, you had a running chase with lots of action, based on a random encounter. And I think this is how I like it. I think this is a great generative factor of random encounters. And I think the particular encounter was from Under Ilafan again, actually. So they're fighting their way back, and they actually got a big haul out of that because the bandit leader had a bunch of treasure on him. I think they used Charm Person to get the bandits to come as far as Daggerford. This was Sabrita, but because that it would count as self-harm for wanted bandits to walk into Daggerford, they were then just arrested. They had options. They picked up a quest at Gillian's Hill. This was organic as they travelled to ask to check in on some missing homesteaders. They had other quests they could do, like Crate Hold, which is over here somewhere, wanting help against orc raiders. Obviously there's a movement of orcs around, things like that. A couple of different options floating around, and rumours as well, but they chose to go back on this small job. They thought it'd be fairly quick, so we did 3 sessions on that first one, and we did about 10ish on Adventure 2, which called Tywelin Homestead. What I'll actually do now is quickly I'll switch over to my house rules. I meant to do this before. This is what I make available, increase now in all my games, for 2e, where I have a fairly set format and I just add things in for the setting. Rules like rules reference, what you can use, character creation method, which is 4d6, keep highest 3 and assign, the same as the default 5th edition. This is actually Gary's indicated preferred one in 1st edition. The difference is that AD&D is so much more challenging, that you want the tougher character in it, you need it, and the bonuses are smaller generally. We use non-weapon proficiencies as per rules reference as well, and I am a controversially and to the loathing and fear of many, a defender of non-weapon proficiencies and of kits actually as well. Kits, there's a debate. I think there's a fair debate. Airdrie has said, someone on Good Discord has made the point for him, is like, no, you just pick all the kits you want, write them up, and have your own kits, and that fixes the problems with, do you ban a kit because this one kit is just weird and broken? I'm pretty chill out about people trying to break the game. I think the game can break characters generally better than characters can break the game. Rules about wizard spells, starting spell components. Spell components are a minor consumable, but fun, or can be fun rather, and to the degree they are consumable, you track with everything else. Part of the resource game that AD&D is designed to be is tracked that way. Rules for alternative spell components. Literacy, basic stuff about how you need reading, writing to read, but anyone with high enough intelligence will know basic common words. Injuries and death, don't die at 0, they die at -3 and bleed out above that. And then there's rules about recovering. XP, including journal rules. I like journal XP because it means someone has written down what's happened and everyone else can see a record of it and be reminded, including missing players. But it's just a way of getting players to help you DM. I'm similarly will in some games run assistant DMs for that reason, not over journals but over keeping certain admin going, deciding stuff for certain monsters. Training, this I've only just adapted this format. I have used a couple. I've used the by the book 2nd edition training, which is pretty expensive, which I do have here actually. Most of get out training is pretty expensive by the book, which is that you need a trainer higher level than you. That's fine. The trainer, you make a roll for it based on the trainer's intelligence or wisdom, and if successful, you pass and you advance in level. If the check surgeon must spend another week training with a bonus, but the idea of there being an average of 100 gold pieces per level per week, and you need to spend a number of weeks minimum, which is the instructor's wisdom minus from 19. So let's say they're 15, which I think a key instructor in Daggerford is. That's 4 weeks, and you're paying 100 gold per level per week. And so it depending on how you interpret that could either be, given you can only train for one, it must really be you can only train one at a time. It must be that your paying 2nd level is 200 gold per week, which means it's at least 800 gold per total, and then you have to check. But the guy makes more money out of you failing, so it's better for them to have you train for longer. No, you do it versus your own thing, but you will train for longer based on them having lower skill, so they'll make more money out of you. It doesn't really make sense. It's also very expensive as you hit higher levels. There are other versions which is just 1,000 gold per level plus a check and then a penalty if you fail. I'm using this at the moment, which is, I saw on Dragon's Foot somewhere, which is basically costing GP to go up a level is flat, but based on where the source of the training, and then making an Interwiz check with bonuses for failed rolls in the future, but an increase in cost. And that's got a nice sort of variability to it. I like that. I've been happy with that, and the cost is somewhere between flat 1,000 versus very often many thousands to go up fairly low levels. 0 level spells, wizards get cantrip 1 a day without memorization, priests get orison 1 day without memorization. This is from a player's option book, which I don't use in any other context, don't use 2.5. But yes, this is just a cantrip type spell for wizards. Anyway, let's go to a bad map of the Llewellyn. That is the wrong map. That is for a different game. The bad map of the Llewellyn Homestead. And this is for my purposes. This wasn't a VTT or anything. This was below ground as well. There was an upstairs area, and I'll go to the word file in a minute to look at it. But this you basically came in this way. There was alternatively could have come in another way. This is above ground. The green marker marks the precinct of a barrow area basically, and then you've got an upper level subterranean there, 9. 5 is similar. In red it's higher than black, and you can see you got various loops through the map. It's not a massive map by any means. The main dungeon, it's a very small map in fact I should say. The main dungeony area is 14 areas, or 16 if you count these 2 sub areas. You've got some bits and pieces in this large room that are separate from each other. These 2 are slightly separate, and then you have a sub level. Essentially, is actually a kind of Underdark fringe of the Underdark, some way below here, which is only 5 rooms. It's very small, and there's a few more upstairs as well in the homestead that you go to investigate. But the players, let's get up Llewellyn Farm. The players came, and this is the basic story, which is that these 3 adventurers had ended up with a powerful artifact tainted by Tharasdon, and as they retired, the guy who'd got this tainted artifact decided to, which is the Weeping Hexagram, it is a capital A artifact, decided to get rid of it, or wanted to get rid of it, and the gnome once he knew more about it, wanted it, and he has come into the area and taken over some Zvarts and said, let's go after the halflings you hate so much, of whom I'm definitely not one. I'm a humble gnome. He's made friends with Duergar too, who are looking for a nearby, or info on a nearby dwarven ruin, Ilafan. And so there's this kind of network of alliances, and there's a couple of allies the party ended up with. Frost, the 3rd adventurer, who's a half-orc fighter. He quite tough, 24 hit points at 3rd level. Lucerne hammer +1/+3 versus fire, heavy crossbow, chainmail. Tough, strength, extraordinary strength. And then they got a farm boy to come and help them too. They also did get another ally, but here above ground I had a very basic key. 7 rooms. There's a dog protecting, or with a wounded sheepdog with the daughter of the family. The rest of the family's disappeared, and Rex the war dog, once they'd healed him, came and helped them too. So it was a party. It's a party at when all the regular players were around, with 8 characters including hirelings, and that was still not a massive party. Definitely felt like they needed the extra support. Master bedroom, they didn't find the secret compartments at the time. Generally speaking, they did look around the smashed up stuff. They got this one valuable book. They had an orange mold, a sentient yellow mold, which is a psionic kind of mold, attack the psionicist, and And it was more or less how I learned Psionic Combat, because we were both just looking at these rules we didn't know very well. But that was useful. And then they went down. Order of Battle. This is not fully written up. I will in time, I think. And then random encounter possibilities going off the Order of Battle with locations. Defensive strategy. So what happens after each raid. And then there's a key. And they went through a bunch of this stuff. Fought on several raids. That led to increasing resistance, naturally, based on the plan here. And then eventually Galadon, at least, the gnome, abandoned the upper levels because there'd been enough raids and there'd been enough casualties that he did not want to take any risks. Then they went, the PCs went down to the Duergar Underdark trading post, and en route they random encountered, not the Lost Lump, it was, I think it was actually up, it was possibly up here in the, as in it might be keyed up here is what I mean. But yeah, they encountered a Steeder on the way, a spider, who alas killed brave Rex, who by fighting in the front rank protected his weaker PC allies. R.I.P. Rex, which was the first loss to the PCs. I think Janosch, the farm boy, was knocked out, but he was fine. He survived. And I think, I don't know if it's at this point or thereabouts, Culloden had been knocked out, and so Goatleaf joined for one session off that player. The Duergar have defensive strategies too, and then there's just a few rooms with the OOB and things they do and resources they have and treasure. And what actually happened was, after having basically fought their way through the Zvart caves, defeated the Zvart's leaders on the whole, they had witch doctors left, but they may not have had any lieutenants. They didn't have a chief. Galadon had abandoned them, and they'd killed the shamans. So the Zvarts were beaten, and a lot of the treasure was taken out. The PCs then went down, and they lost Rex to the Steeder. They came up with a plan to insinuate themselves into get into this Duergar base. They charmed the Duergar on watch outside in a cavern, and then set up an ambush. And the ambush basically went wrong on a colour spray from Galadon, where the PCs were grouped, and colour spray is an area spell. It doesn't have the same impact as sleep, where you're just like, everyone here is asleep. Colour spray has the same literal mechanical effect of knocking people out, but it's an area spell, so there are ways to mitigate against it. And I feel like that was reasonable monster design versus a party with a couple of second level and a couple of first level characters at that point. They'd gone too deep, really. Which is fine, risk reward. Their plan wasn't stupid. It could have worked out in the circumstances, and that would have been a famous victory. They were captured, but they're captured by Duergar, and this actually led to a funny thing where they just negotiated their way out. They said, well, we've got information on these dwarven ruins, because they'd got a map as a reward from the caravan mission, and because the Duergar didn't care, they didn't really want to help Galadon any more than anything else. They were just working with him. They got the information elsewhere. It meant Galadon wasn't going to be a threat as much anymore. And they returned to the surface. They rescued Amos Llewellyn. They'd rescued the rest of the family in the Zvart caves, and they rescued Amos down in the Duergar, because that was an OOB point, that Galadon will take Amos with him, because Amos is the valuable hostage who might know where the hexagram is. That was the story. It was very fun. It was thing I wrote. It's small. It is thing that there is a sense that, even with a bit of the way that the space is meant to be a bit more Warren-like than the key is, because it's Zvarty, it was it's a 22 area thing, and we took a long time to do that. But that's partly, there were other reasons for that. It was partly because there was more investigation in some things, more discussion. There was downtime. There was the whole capture business, which took an entire session to go and sort stuff out for. There were random encounters, therefore, to do with that. And there were multiple raids that were going through the same rooms because the defence was fairly strong. Probably, whether it's that we played slow or I ran it slow, I think it's probably fair to say that we played slow functioning. Probably my fault. And levelling out of it was funny because it got most of the PCs, other than Culloden, in terms of the core PCs up to second, Culloden and Goatleaf had split that player's XP when he was present. So there'd been a thing there where, like, I don't think he wouldn't have made 2000, but Culloden. But it did slow that PC down. But everyone else was at second or indeed third. And the Sound Assist was third. And yeah, I think that indicates a slow progress, because even if you're not looking at what some people say, 3 sessions per level or something, 3 ordinary sessions, our sessions are shorter, so it might already be 4 or 5. Nonetheless, 13 sessions or so for some PCs to just be hitting second was slow, and I think it's because there are a couple of things. One, the big horde that was the reward, the real reward, the bandits horde off the first mission, the 3-session caravan duty one, was split in a way that ended up with, like, nearly 2000 XP on a 1-session character. That wasn't that character stealing magic items from the group in the classic Fear. It was just an XP sponge. Then there's the other thing is, I guess there's risk reward. Talked about this with the players actually just tonight, that sometimes the players have definitely made a judgment when they know that they're probably not far from a bigger reward, generally close to a bigger reward, but they've made a judgment that they are not strong enough to get it. And that means you spent time getting there, but then you've withdrawn. So there's wasted time. Well, wasted is relative, but time that has not been XP efficient. And I think that's probably true. And I think, of course, that's actually fine. And I say this, this Daggerford group, tonight they survived a very tough random encounter. The last 2 sessions I've played, including with some of those players, 5 PCs have died in 2 sessions due to, in the first case, a random encounter, and in the second case, sneaking into the giants. These are both streams that are up actually, Dark Sun and Planescape. Yeah, so it's right to take caution sometimes and to preserve your XP, and sacrifice your time. Preserve the XP you've earned and sacrifice your time in hope of future XP. So it's also probably just that the Llewellyn Homestead, there were the XP may just have been relatively low for the relatively complex and tough base assault, not in terms of size of area, but OOB and combat strategy and dangerous things in there. They also just didn't get some of the valuable stuff, like Galadon's Den has a he left with these things, but they didn't get them in time. So that's a Bracer AC5 and a Life Drinker Dagger and a Wand of Wonders plus a spellbook. That's a lot of magic XP that was there. The Mushroom Farm, some of the and again some extra stuff. They didn't clear that out. They just scouted it. They weren't up in the Barrow and Giant Badger entrenched mound area, which again you got a white with a magic sword and a Ring of Flight and a bit of money. So they didn't get that stuff. So that was about exploration and about risk reward in some cases. Galadon was able to escape. They then lost to him in the actual engagement they had. Then after that, we've recently, this is a scenario I adapted from another adventure. They did, Adventure 3 was the Fane of the Sunswallower, and I guess that was 7-ish sessions. And this was more efficient, even though the XP wasn't always very generous. There is a very rare instance of, it's not story XP, but almost story XP. The only instance so far. You'll see what I mean in a second. They're asked to go and help. Let's get up our region map again, Llewellyn map again. They're asked to go to a lady in her fort on the edge of... Oh no, initially they're asked to go to the Flotian Estates up here, where there's been a theft, and the Elven Lord explains what this theft has been of a altar, and the altar's been smashed open, in fact, and things taken from within. And this fire element or elemental themed altar, and it's been stolen. Something inside has been taken, and it's been traced by they ask him to scry it, and he traced it to the Lizard Marsh, and they go to Crom's Hold, the kind of local border fort on the Lizard Marsh, and find out that a dragon has recently been with some corrupted, like mutated, lizard men, and has taken another altar. And so they go into the Lizard Marsh to find out what's happening. This is an adult black dragon. They are now a 1/3 level character, and 3 second levels and a first are the core characters. And so they go in, not looking to fight a dragon, but just to see what they can find out. They fight some weird half-orcs, weird-looking half-orcs, and clear them out and find an egg, a black dragon egg, it turns out, in their ruined manor house. And the egg hatches and bonds, Xerxes as his name, bonds to Culloden. They have been joined, though, at Crom's Hold by another militia member, Meechan Givens, who's come to help. And they go further in, and they find an abandoned temple to a Monitor, the Lathander, but a Monitor being the more severe Netherese god. And they go and fight their way through this, and they do 3 raids, I think, total into this. And after the second, they go back to Crom's Hold, and they actually end up getting reinforcements. But basically, they do classic kind of, they sneak up onto the roof, there's a hole in the roof, they ambush some guys, they good tactics. They kill these corrupted lizardmen, and the lizardmen reinforce the upper positions, but gradually, because they're so fanatical, most of them, to joining their queen, worshipping Thosfjörnen, the sun swallower, this black dragon, they're not actually very good at defending the upper reaches, even as they're under more and more attack. They meet a lizardman who's basically still neutral and doesn't want this crazy stuff to happen. Assumes that's why everyone's being mutated, because of this weird worship of a black dragon. And they get some reinforcements. They get 2 soldiers from Crom's Hold. They go down into the depths and end up in a furious battle, where by this point the fighter is walking wounded. He can't actually fight. He is giving advice from the back and carrying his own pack pretty much, and because that's all he can do. So you've got, a couple of three followers, 3 henchmen or whatever, and a few PCs, and they manage to break their way through a large group of corrupted lizardmen led by this lizard queen. There's a there's a riff in this, at least, on Return of the Lizard King with the lizard queen. Though it's different, very not Return of the Lizard King. What is Tomb of the Lizard King? What's is it an N series 1? I series 1? I think it's I series, isn't it? But yeah. And then they go and negotiate with the Black Dragon to return the Wormling. They don't negotiate, they offer it as tribute, correctly, and the Black Dragon lets them go with the altar, as a kind of as a gesture of thanks, but really just to get them to leave. It's kind of a, I'm not going to kill you now because, I'm pleased about this, but just leave. And as they go, they leave Meechan, who... because Smithy has died, Private Smithy of the Crom's Hold has died, and Sergeant Duran is wounded, and Kaitamar is wounded, walking wounded. No, Kaitamar is dead. Kaitamar's dead. Duran's walking wounded, and Culloden is walking wounded, and Smithy is dead. So you've had another PC loss. One of the spare PCs had died in the half-orc battle actually as well. Goatleaf had died and stayed dead, just left behind. But they come on the way back. They avoid some trolls. They throw rations to them. They then camp, and Meechan is on watch, and people wake up to hear her smashing the altar, taking something from it, and fleeing, going invisible seemingly, and fleeing, disappearing. So they have lost the item they came for. They've been double crossed, and then they gradually work out, oh wait, this lady just turned up more or less out of nowhere, said she was a militia woman, and we just let her join us. So there's some player reflection, like we talked about this actually with the Dark Sun near TPK, is that when you lose in AD&D, old school D&D in general, the job is not to work out what the story point was. It's not to be like, oh wow, the story, she was a traitor, oh no, I was tricked. But to think, that was not the result I wanted. How do we do better next time? How do we play better? There is like a ludic element. So yeah, they... returned to Dagford and trained and whatever, and they in that Robin the Thief has trained, Culloden the Fighter has trained, Sabaton and Rolandi the Wizards have trained. Kaitamar wasn't quite there and still isn't quite there, and Osling wasn't around. So of that core group, they 4 of them have managed to train. They owe a bit of money, but I've let them do that for now to the militia. For now, and they've got a couple of threats they're now following. So I'd say Phelan the Sun Swallower works better because the black dragon egg is treasure. You'd normally count it as treasure reasonably, because or you could do, and certainly when you look at prices for manticore eggs or whatever, or wyvern eggs, that's the sense you're getting, is they're being counted as treasure, and that would mean that they're gold for XP. People may disagree, but that's how I'd read it. And there is a reward in this pre-written adventure for a story reward for the egg, and I think I was like, yeah, that seems fair. Actually, I think I'd see that as the gold for XP, and they can't bank it because the thing's hatched. As it was, Xerxes was a vital follower and fighter throughout. Who Culloden's character, Culloden's player, was actually playing, was once he was walking wounded, was just this black dragon wormling. And there's a particularly epic thing actually, where as the Lizard Queen dives into the underground river to get away, the black dragon wormling jumps in and just tears her apart as the rest of them are firing arrows at her, and or they fire a volley, and then the wormling jumps in to eat. So yeah, there's I think that the XP flow worked better there. There was plenty of combat. Tywelin there was combat, but it was with Zvarts, and they're cheaper. There was also a few. They hit a big treasure hoard in the Fane of the Sun Swallower, which was the Lizard Queen's own hoard, which did include a bunch of stuff, including a magic shield, for instance. There are a few bits and pieces, rooms they didn't clear out. They did. I think the particular problem, maybe this is how Culloden went down. There were play mistakes, like room that smells eggy and unpleasant. Enter with a torch because it's a dark internal room. It explodes. There's swamp gas coming up, marsh gas coming from up underneath. So there's some mistakes and stuff that people learnt from. But generally speaking, they hit a couple of big treasure spots. They got the altar. They didn't get whatever was in the altar, this water-themed altar. But they did get the altar, and so it was worth some XP for treasure. And that was it seemed to flow better for XP, and most people gained a level out of that, and a bit more than a level, and some would still say it was slow going if it's 7 for 1.5 levels rather than 7 for 2 levels, say. But in the context, if I'm actually more like 5 sessions a level on average, 1.5 in 7 is bang on that. So they then have a couple of options. They still have a call from Crate Hold. I'm not sure, they might have had something else. They were interested in Bowshot Caves. So recent flooding clearing out the caves and showing that there's silver deposits there seemingly. They've got Ilafan stuff they've heard about Ilafan, orcs massing in the Misty Forest. They also had a rumour they finally wanted to follow up on, was the court wizard will pay for and potentially kind of mentor people who go and get him rare ingredients and stuff like that. So rather than the town wizard, who is currently Rolandi's main mentor, rather than just that person, they'd have access to the spellbook, and this other person was past their theory. Also, he might just have cool stuff. He might have cool contacts. So they they went to him, and they were given a job to go to. It's up here somewhere. The Silver Wisp Swamp. I think it might be Neverwinter Wood. So it's quite some way away. But that's one thing, is that as you're kind of getting to, call it the X in the BX. We actually talked about this in tonight's session. This is already slightly wildernessy because they go up and down the road and they go places. Hence why they get hit by manticores sometimes. But as you're going up at very low levels, there is a natural thing and a good thing to say. Here's a very small area. Here's the village. Here's the nearby. Maybe there's 2 nearby hooks, but they're each within a day's walk or a couple of days' walk. And the wilderness may not be super deadly. That is the classic basic model, and it makes sense. And it's partly because the dungeon environment is one you design, and which you intentionally keep quite close design constraints on. Remember, the first level of the dungeon is for first level characters, and we'll have first level monsters as an average. There might be some tougher stuff, but first level as an average is the AD&D definition of these things. Design for balance is a thing in early D&D, but the balance is not the balance we expect. The balance is to do with challenge and to do with the risk reward that the players need to decide about, rather than that the fight will be 50-50 in terms of strength. And yeah, so the dungeon is controllable in that way, whereas if you're just saying, oh, there's wilderness, there's all the natural animals that are around there, the players can go in any direction, it's in a Mamorpaga terms, we might say it's not level gated. And that's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, but it's something where, especially with players who are training into the game, giving them some sense of this is the kind of stuff you want to do is maybe natural. On the other hand, B2 obviously does have a wilderness straight away. But yeah, as they're getting slightly higher, and they're more likely to attract attention and sound convincing to a court mage as errand boys, nothing special, they can go a bit further away to the Silver Wisp Swamp and get some magic flowers, basically. So yeah, that's something they've not done straight away, and that might be something we actually use some of the secondary characters who've been made in a B team party to do that, just for the sake of being able to split forces. Everyone else going down to Bowshot, as I say. That's certainly Rolandi, Sabrata, Kaitamar, and Gaston, Culloden's player's new reserve character, because Culloden's recovering, who is a priest of Romanos, the Bullywug god, who I've basically ruled as like only a cleric, actually, not a specialist priest. But no, this is Sothoga, you understand. This was the gag was like he's a priest of Sothoga. No one actually believes he's a priest of Romanos. They assume it's some sort of weird, cranky thing he says, because no one could be like, I am the priest of a demon frog god. But yeah, they're going down there, and tonight they started investigating the area, found that it'd been occupied since the villagers had last seen it. And there's here this sense that time might matter is important. I've tried to put it into a few hooks here and in other games I run. That particularly where there are living rumour lists, that not resolving a rumour may lead to worse results. And or different results, let's put it that way, but usually worse. The point being, the NPCs keep acting without the players. The players aren't the centre of the universe. They have to act and be decisive if they want to shape things. Otherwise, just leaving stuff there infinitely means the players, it doesn't really matter what they do, as long as if they want to go to it, they do it, and if they don't, they don't. Whereas if there are, there's Duergar wanting to go to Illitharn. One reason the players are prioritising going to Illitharn after Bowshot, they're assuming they'll go to Bowshot for some days, and then they'll go to Illitharn, or some of them will afterward, because they know there's stuff going on, they know the Duergar know about it, they want to get involved whilst it's still potentially relevant rather than the situation has deteriorated. Yeah, but similarly they have something else where they're like, well, we just want to do this thing up in the Neverwinter Wood or wherever it is. Bowshot Caves is something where the orcs weren't there day one of the campaign, but they are there now. So, there's a time thing there, and we know that the orcs are active across the Misty Forest and are associated with Illitharn too. One thing with the possibility of going up to Neverwinter Wood is that though this is a game, an open table game, which is based around Daggerford, you're a militiaman going on little quests. Of course, as the characters are getting up there, and as you've got a character nearly hitting 4th, and there's no reason not to think with any sort of treasure haul, you might not have other characters hitting 4th within 3 or 4 sessions. Maybe slightly quicker than before. Then in the last kind of block, well, sorry, the first block has been quicker, as I say, in the last adventure. But yeah, I think it's going to be natural. They're going to go wider and wider. My big, heavily home-ruled Chult game, they start off in Chult, going up and down the rivers and doing stuff, etc. This is actually basically, that's a 5th edition true map, I think, actually. One thing I've got is that Orm is still in charge in Chult, so they've got this empire in Mazdacar, the Moonshae, Southern Moonshaes, and Chult, and there's different dynamics where some PCs are more supportive, some are less supportive or antagonistic to that, and there's interesting stuff. But the players have stables of characters in that, and at this point where they have a bunch of higher mid-level characters, of course they're beginning to run all over the world. They're not quite ready to go to Thay yet, but they have done a bunch of stuff on the Sword Coast. They've done stuff in Lantern. They're about to go to Icewind Dale. Some are about to go to Cormyr and the Dales. So it's spreading out because naturally those mid to high level characters are You want PCs to always have agency, but mid to high level characters have geographic agency. They can just go and be like, I just want to go somewhere else and do something because I've got money and I've got power. The second level guy has agency somewhat in which local crappy mission he does and also in how he does the mission. But the second level guy is not like, maybe I'll go and found an empire somewhere. But yeah, so though it starts on the small scale in Daggerford, as it's settled into, there are a number of characters of higher levels, it's natural that it's spreading out. My learning curve, there are things like it's an open table game, and we have had a few groups of people join at different points and stick around. But I think it's natural because of regular schedule, because of players who can give it time, that there are some people who are just regulars. It's just a normal game to them, essentially, and they can invest in it. That's not a downside or an upside. I think it's just an interesting dynamic. I think there is a lesson about gold, which is definitely gold for XP, which I think I've designed a number of gold for XP adventures, or equivalent, gold needed for training to gain XP adventures, many of them. And so gold solely for training is possibly more generous. I think you can get away with more because the PCs, money is fungible across PCs basically at that point, and so XP is fungible. Whereas if it's strict gold for XP, then who is where and what they get matter. And those some of the reasons, as I explain, like maybe slightly slow play at points, possibly just risk reward decisions, which may well be the right ones, but just are less lucrative. I think also, think about Tywelin, and just probably my general experience, I probably haven't always thought I will give a rough budget in my head for various kinds of XP, but I probably am not always careful enough about being like, yes, we're going to do it this way. I'm going to design this way, so this level has this much XP, so that a 50% haul will look like this, and that will add the characters who are roughly this level when they get here, probably because of where they are now. Of course, it'll be less valuable to them if they are higher level, more valuable if they are lower level. That's how it works. And so in designing the Bowshot Caves areas, I have thought more about like, what's the XP that should be here? The same, I'm looking at a few other things. I'm like, what XP should be here? Of course, there are other sources of XP in the world once you're in a wilderness. And just tonight, the main source of XP was a manticore, not killed, but fled. In fact, there are 3 manticores attacked a party which was, 3 PCs last time, 2 PCs this time. And the PCs came up with a plan, both of them, the Psionicist and the Witch, so a kind of okay fighter and a bad fighter. Generally, witches don't have any weapon proficiencies. They couldn't fight it, they didn't think realistically in any way, and there were 3 of them, so Phantasmal forced 2 of them away, who chased after a cow instead, and they've got low int and they failed int checks. Failed int checks to get a save. The other one failed the int check by 1, I think, but I adjudicated he didn't get to detect illusion on it, he didn't get to do a check for disbelief, but was like, there's 2 of them fighting over that, I'm going to go after the rest of the prey. Came after them while the Psionicist put up a barrier, an inertial barrier, which meant the spikes did not kill them. They both got hit by 3 spikes. A lot of damage was put out. The witch survived by the barrier reducing the damage a lot, and the Psionicist also reduced it a lot and certainly kept going that way. Then decisive round, it has caught up. It flies down. It only needs a round to penetrate through the barrier, and it gets spooked. This dramatic moment, as it is equivalent 7th level fighter, it needs a 13 base to stop spook affecting it. Spook has a penalty based on the caster level, and so there's -1 penalty. The Manticore rolls 13, gets 12, runs away. I gave them 1 Manticore's worth of XP, 975 XP, because 2 of them they technically just fled from. It's a trick, but they fled from it. The other one, they actually caused to flee. And you might give half XP maybe in that situation. But because of the whole thing, I gave them the whole 975. This is what you'll have seen actually on this list here. They also got their bonus stuff for spells. I like that as a mechanic. I think it is a reasonable and measurable, reliable, repeatable way of giving XP for doing stuff your class is good at and practicing your class skills. So yeah, that has been how it's gone so far. And I guess, yeah, there's a couple of adventure threads there going forward, which the players can somewhat decide what they want to focus on. But the Bowshot Caves, I guess, will probably be the priority now. But there is also this other thread to go up to Neverwinter to go and have a look at some stuff, or near Neverwinter, and then Ilafan as well. And it's now settled and feels like we can keep going at a steady pace, because you've got to get past it. You've got to get past one session and you've got to get past 3 sessions. Those are the classics, aren't they, I think? But at 21 sessions with settled players, there's a sense that as long as we can find just about enough time, this could go on for a long time. And it's got space to grow. As I say, people are welcome to join this one. Look for new recruits. It's been a learning experience. And it's been interesting trying to play a even more than normal, in a sense, rumour board led campaign, and more than normal, and I tend to go that direction, but because of the fact that there needs to be an ability for a tiny bit of West Marchiness where players can turn up and decide, we're not part of that, can we do this instead? Or, okay, we don't know what happened last time, but the party is free to do something, let's do this, rather than you're in the middle of the epic quest and now you're picking up this bit, because players who drop in or out or can't always make it aren't going to be able to engage with that well. Whereas if it's like a relatively shorter job, or there are new choices coming up, I think that makes it easier for the drop in, drop out. So yeah, there's been learning experiences over the Gold, like I say, as well. I think just in general as a way to learn 2nd edition, it's been good. It's also had a variety of environments, albeit all the main adventures all being dungeony so far, apart from Caravan Duty. But the other 3 have all been more archetypal, like Zvart Caves underneath an abandoned homestead, a ruined temple, and now some some above ground caves, or rather top level in the kind of hills caves, with mysteries about what's going to be behind the washout. Anyway, that's me for now. That's may or may not be useful to you. Hopefully it's interesting seeing the inside of a campaign and some of the logic that's come into it, some of the resources thrown into it. I've written Bowshot Caves and Llewellyn Homestead. Ilafan is going to be based on all the Ilafan sources, including this. This has the Caravan Duty one, and I won't name Fane of the Sun Swallower, but that is from another adventure, and originally a 5th edition adventure, actually, retrofitted, controversially. But yeah, tell me some of your experiences of putting together campaigns and some of the learning curves in your recent stuff. I'd love to hear from you, and I will see you next time.